I'm going to show you what's called the most interesting building in the UK and the story of how it tragically resulted in the death of an innocent man in 1970, over 1,000 years after it was first built. Quickly, this is actually the first video on this channel, long form video anyway. If you do appreciate it, enjoy it, please do subscribe, stick around for more, and I'd love to do loads more videos like this all across Britain. Now, this structure is extremely well hidden, and most people, even from the city, have no idea it's actually there. It's in the northern English city of York, and it sits behind the York Explore Library and Archive on Museum Street, which is not too far from York Minster. But to get there, you take the gate round the side of the library and walk all the way around. On the left, you'll see an old tower and you'll see some Roman coffins, but you'll see a medieval wall and an old tiny wall, which is actually a Roman wall. If you follow this wall all along, you'll come across this small stone structure built into the Roman wall. Now, this is it. Though I can't say I completely agree, there is a good reason why Historic UK, who by the way claim to be the largest online history magazine in the whole of the UK, they said, "We have been lucky enough to visit some of the grandest, most historic buildings in all the land. Strange then that the seemingly inconsequential Anglian Tower in York tops our list of the most interesting historical sites in the country." English Heritage also say there are no parallels to this building anywhere in Britain, nor in the whole of Europe. The current remains are less than 5 metres high, but when it was built, it was believed to have been over 10 metres tall, probably used as a watchtower or some sort of defensive structure. The part you see at the moment would have been the lower floor, and you can see it's really just a crossing with 4 entrances or doorways going around. So there would have been, on top of what you can currently see, that's where the main part of the tower would have been, like I say, probably a watchtower or some sort of defensive structure. Now here's where it gets interesting. Nobody actually knows the date of the structure when it was built, but it's called the Anglian Tower as most historians believe it was built in the Anglo-Saxon period, around the 7th century when King Edwin converted to Christianity, which was a major event in York's history in 627. This is why it's thought to be so special, because that would make it one of only 2 surviving secular buildings, which is a non-religious building, non-ecclesiastical building, from the Anglo times that has survived all the way through the Dark Ages. As you should know by now, Dark Ages does not mean it was dark and nothing happened and everything was bad. It just means that nothing was really recorded from that time. So this is one of only 2 buildings to survive through that time that is non-religious. But some people argue, and on York's official council website, where it lists about all the buildings, it does state the building is probably late Roman 5th century, before they left Britain, that kind of period. But truthfully, nobody knows, and its official name is still the Anglian Tower. And also the limestone used in this structure is from a completely different area to where the Romans extracted their magnesium limestone in Tadcaster. But how did it actually survive so long when all else of its time was pretty much destroyed or completely covered up? The story is actually quite remarkable. When the Vikings invaded and conquered York in 866 AD, which was another massive time in York's history, they built new ramparts and defences all across the city, much of it on top of and incorporated into the Roman and Anglo-Saxon structures. The Anglian Tower here was actually buried in mud, soil, rubble, as the Vikings built on top of it. And it wasn't until 1,000 years later that it was accidentally discovered. This was in the 1830s when workers were installing pipes underneath the city of York. They accidentally stumbled upon it. It was another 140 years before the site was properly excavated. Now, a kind follower, an archaeologist from York, actually messaged me, wrote to me, describing how a colleague who was working on the Anglian Tower had put his pick through a Roman coffin whilst on the excavation site. The coffin was lead-lined and the body had liquefied under the pressure, making for a rather revolting, gruesome experience, as you can probably imagine. However, this story pales in comparison to the tragic events that unfolded in 1971. The project was led by a promising young archaeologist named Geoffrey Radley, who had worked on a number of notable digs. He was also a Yorkshireman. On this fateful day in 1971, Radley broke the main rule about working alone in a deep excavation, that you do not go in by yourself. So he went in during a tea break by himself, when of course he shouldn't have done, and the trench tragically collapsed upon him, and he passed away at the age of 34, ending his promising career far too early. This was well over a millennium after the structure was first built. This really should tell you everything about the history of York and the history of Britain as a whole, just absolutely steeped in history.